Good morning and welcome to a webinar this morning here. My name is Jim Ripp. I'm that gentleman you see on the left there. I'll be your moderator today. I'm the manager of technical training here at Full Compass Systems. And if you look to the right, you see the rather astute gentleman there, Tom Littrell. He'll be presenting the webinar for you all this morning. He's the education and training specialist at Electronic Theater Controls. The subject today, lighting basics for houses of worship. I have to say, in our technical department, we get a lot of questions in this area, just due to the fact that there are so many different variances on the sizes and shapes of houses of worship, and trying to get this all tied together with some good lighting. So Tom's going to help us answer all those questions. I see there's several of you still logging in here, so let's move on to some housekeeping issues that we get cleared up first thing here. As far as housekeeping, we have, I want you to keep in mind that during the presentation, you probably have questions that will come up. Feel free to type in those questions on the sidebar that you see. There's an area for you to type in your question. Absolutely, when that question comes up during the webinar, type it in. We won't answer those questions or address those questions until the end of the webinar. So again, type those in right away. We will definitely, I will make sure that Tom gets those questions and we will answer those for you. Also, a recording of the presentation will be made available to all of you attendees. So future, if you get pulled away from the webinar in midstream, don't worry, there's an email that will come out in a couple of days. You will get a copy of the recording. Also, please complete the survey at the end of the webinar. It's very, very short 2-question survey. This will help us moving forward with webinars and bringing you subjects that are valuable to you all. So without further ado, let's move on to introduce our presenter today, Tom Littrell from Electronic Theater Controls, ETC. And Tom, looking at your bio here, it absolutely amazes me. We could have a whole nother webinar here just on Led Zeppelin, David Bowie, and Genesis. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. How was that?
It was really, those were interesting times. I think what most people have in their heads about what that was all about was not exactly like that. Even back then, it was a pretty professional, hard-working way to earn a living. And you think sometimes about the more sensational aspects of that, but for those of us doing lighting, it was a seriously dedicated, hard job to get those gigantic lighting systems up in the air and make all that stuff work every day in hockey rinks and sports arenas all over the country and all over the world.
I can imagine, but I'm sure you've learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way, and you applied those to many other places, including houses of worship. So without delaying any further, let's push on, Tom, and take it away.
So hello, everyone. First off, I want to say thanks to the folks at Full Compass for letting me be here and present this. One little bit of background, I was around and in the lighting business in the late 1980s and early 1990s when it became apparent that the whole nature of church, the whole nature of worship was changing, the whole nature of what a house of worship and a church building was becoming, and not just a place where people sat quietly on a Sunday morning, but there's a whole lot more to church and a whole lot more to worship these days. And I was around when that happened, and I watched it happen. And I also watched, quite frankly, when companies that were good at audio, they were good at video, started helping these churches put together these, make their facilities more modern day. Sometimes lighting was a bit of a stepchild. Sometimes lighting was kind of something they didn't know that much about and pretended to and added on top. And a lot of times the work wasn't very well done. And one of the advantages to being here doing this all these years later is that you now see companies like ETC, the people I work for, and companies like Full Compass that actually do this for a living, that actually understand lighting and that have experts who can help you get what you need out of your church, out of your church's building. The next thing, I work for ETC, Electronic Theater Controls. Who are they? Well, they're located in Middleton, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Madison, Wisconsin. It surprises a lot of people to find out that one of the world's largest lighting companies for stage and theatrical and house of worship lighting is located in Wisconsin, but we are. And we make theater stuff, to put it quite simply. We make the consoles, the dimmers, the conventional fixtures, the LED stage lighting fixtures. We make house lighting, moving lights, all the stuff in the middle, and we also make rigging systems. So we are a full service manufacturer of all this wonderful equipment that goes into theaters. But more importantly, for the context of today's presentations, we do systems. It's not just about gear that you order 5 of those and 1 of those and have it shipped to your site. We are in the business of designing and building systems, and that includes churches, that includes schools from elementary, university, regional theater, performing arts centers, theme parks, stadiums, and we are international in scope. And as I say that, I realize you think, well, these guys are big guys that do big, huge things. What are they going to do for my facility? But another thing to talk about is the fact that not only do we do systems of all shapes and all sizes, and we understand your needs. Are you a small church just trying to add a few things to make your facility a little better lit? Or are you a large church getting ready to build a brand new building that needs a full-on lighting system? To brag a little bit, we're really good at that. And we work with people at Full Compass who are really good at that and understand how to do all that stuff. One thing to talk a little bit today, we're talking about familiarization. We're not talking about training. Everything we're talking about today, we have people spend their entire careers learning this stuff and continuing to learn, so there won't be any training going on. We're just going to talk a little bit about some of the details behind lighting. We're going to talk about what lighting designers do a little bit and how that fits into a house of worship context. And then we're going to talk about the lighting systems themselves. And important, I know to a whole lot of you, is LEDs are changing things and changing things an awful lot. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the details behind that and what that means for systems for houses of worship. And finally, video. Most churches, or a lot of churches now, do video as part of their day-to-day and week-by-week presentations. Not only are people sitting in the sanctuary looking at a live human being, they're also looking at the image of that live human being on a screen on either side of the chancel, and then also a lot of times it's broadcast. This stuff is going out. So lighting for video as well as lighting for the human being sitting in the room is an important part about this. So before we start designing the system, we have to know what you need. This is kind of your job. This is kind of what you know and we don't know. What is your space and what is going to be best for your space? A lot of times we're talking more traditional, old school church, beautiful ornate houses of worship. A lot of modern day churches are a lot more modern in appearing and look more, they look like big auditoriums, and they're multi-purpose facilities used for Sunday services, used for meetings throughout the week. Just a lot of difference there and a lot of differences in the requirements. What about size? As I said earlier, we know that not every one of you out there is dealing with a slightly different size of space. Is it a small, intimate worship area, or for some of you, it could be as big as this picture here on the right. A huge, huge worship space. It's important to know that the needs of each one of these spaces is different, and it's important to know that different hardware and different system designs exist to best serve facilities of either kind, and everything in the middle as well. The next thing, and this for me is so interesting how this has changed, the style of worship. Are we sitting in the sanctuary looking at a choir, looking at a pastor standing in a pulpit? Are we watching a praise band? And in a lot of situations, I know in your cases, I think, you're doing both. You may have a 9 o'clock traditional service, you may have an 11 o'clock service, which is totally different. You may have a praise band for some services. You may want it to be kind of quiet and traditional for some services, and you want brighter color and more concert type lighting for other parts of your services. So all of that stuff factors into what you need for a lighting system. Finally, video. If there are cameras in the room, it changes everything, and the expectations for lighting, for the lighting design. And like I said, it could be a smaller or medium-sized church with a screen on either side, so that you can see close-ups of the people leading the worship, or in some cases it is big full-on video and you're doing broadcast, and those needs are very important, and it changes what the lighting designers, the people putting your systems together, need to know. To start talking a little bit about what lighting is, two of the initial things that you really start to think about, or that are part of the process, are angles and areas. Good lighting depends on getting the light coming from the right direction. In the case of this very simple drawing, you've got a top view of a human being standing there. We show a light that's 45 degrees off from the right, a light that's 45 degrees off from the left. So we've got some nice front light, and we also have a backlight or a top light. As we go further, you're going to see all these different ideas and what constitutes good lighting angles. The thing that scares a lot of people, well, first, before I do that, let's look at this. Now, these front light angles especially, you'll be talking about these a lot when you talk to a lighting designer, and where do I actually put the lights in my facility? Theatrical folks, stage lighting people, like to think in terms of 40 to 45 degrees up. And if you look at our subject, she's nicely lit, but there are shadows. In the context of a stage, of a theatrical presentation, that looks pretty good. She's well lit, the shadows add a little bit of drama. From the context of broadcast, or actually seeing her face on a screen, we may not like all of those shadows. So let's look at a front light from 22 degrees. All of a sudden, she's better lit. The shadows go away, her face is better lit. It looks less dramatic, it looks less natural. Or sorry, it looks more natural on the context of a video screen. What happens when we go down even further? Well, there's no shadows and her face is very well lit, but it's not a natural look. It's not a flattering look. Lighting folks refer to this as a deer in the headlights. This is just not a good look. So the front light angle is important. Let's look at all those together. From 5 degrees up in the corner, very flat, very straightforward. And the best one from our point of view is the one under that in the lower left, the idea of 22 degrees. And when I say 22 degrees, nobody's going to get exactly 20 degrees, but somewhere between 18 and 24, just to make up numbers. The idea that light at kind of a medium high level will give you a good looking close-up and make your video look a lot better. If you go to a lighting textbook, a lot of times you'll see something that looks like this. Remember, this is a plan view. We're looking straight down at that human being standing there, and we've got all those lights from all those angles. We've got a front light. We've got an angled light from either direction in the front. We've got side light. We've got down light. We've got diagonal backs. And you'll dig deep into the theatrical lighting textbooks, and this will scare you to death. It kind of leaves you with the impression that I need all of those angles to get any kind of decent lighting at all. And the reality is, no, you're not going to get all of those lighting angles. And no, you don't need all of those lighting angles to get good lighting for video. The important thing to know about this is that lighting from different angles, and the more you can add light from different angles, the better your lighting is going to be, both from the point of view of the people sitting in the room, in the sanctuary, looking at the chancel area, and from the point of view of people who are looking up at the video screens. Each one of these lights, looking at these simple drawings, each one of these angles gives you a different result. 45 degrees from the front looks different than flatter from the front. Top light from straight above looks different than diagonal backlight. Each one of these by itself is very dramatic and perhaps not very appropriate, although you sometimes want those if you're talking about quieter services, if you're doing solo artists, if you're doing each one of these angles, if you have individual control over these lights, give you interesting looks. Side lights are really important to add if you can get the positions. And I realize that in traditional houses of worship, especially over the chancel area, sometimes you can't get lights everywhere you want them. The architecture gets in the way, but each one of these positions adds something. But at the end of the day, if you've got 3 positions, you can get a good looking light on a human being, both from the point of view of a person sitting in the sanctuary looking at the worship leaders, and from the point of view of broadcast, what the camera is seeing to put up on the screens and send out. In the case of this example, we've got 2 front lights at 22 degrees, one from the left and one from the right, and we've got one top light, and she is quite nicely lit without having all that other stuff. The other thing, don't forget about the background. Adding lights to the architecture. Whether it's curtains, whether it's traditional house of worship architectural details, anything you can do to bring those lights up gives you a deeper, better picture. It looks so much better to have light on the architecture behind the presenters, to give them something to work against, to give the eyes something to see other than just the faces in a dark black screen. So all that stuff is important. All of these angles are important. But keep remembering, you don't need every angle that you see written about in the lighting textbooks. The next thing we do when we're designing a light is we start dividing our area up into our overall area up into smaller areas. In the case of this drawing, we've got these 9 overlapping circles. Remember, you're looking at a plan view. You're looking down at what might be the chancel area of a church. You've got 3 areas across the front. In the middle of the chancel, we've got 3 more areas, and toward the upstage, perhaps where the choir loft might be, in a more traditional church, you've got 3 more areas. Note that all these circles overlap. It's important for all these lights to blend together. If you have 5 circles across the stage, people will walk in and out of darkness, or 3 circles. It's important that you build these areas to overlap. Video needs even coverage. If you're sitting in the room, your eye is very forgiving. If people are walking a little bit in an area that's not quite evenly lit, your eye forgives that and you really don't notice it. The camera notices that and will see it. So working to get good even coverage of all these lights in all these areas is really important. Generally, you don't use hard edge lights. You take lights which can have a soft edge. R119 is a very standard diffusion filter that takes the hard edge of a spotlight and softens it so that they overlap, they blend. And once again, once you've done this and you have individual control all these areas, you can turn them all on at once for a big bright Sunday morning service, or you can turn everything off and bring up just area 5 if you want to highlight a soloist, if you want something more dramatic. So having control over all this is what lighting designers do, is put the lights in the proper angles, divide the stage up into areas, and make sure that all those angles are represented. And again, you can use these all together or you can use them by themselves depending on what you need. What I decided to do is let's kind of go through a little exercise here in a very simple way. I've got a chancel area. I've got a congregation sitting out there. Remember, again, this is plan view. You're looking down from the ceiling. So what am I going to do? Well, someone in a textbook that I found created this little drawing. We've got some lights in front of the chancel by the congregation, and we've got 3 rows of lights over the chancel area, over the stage area, if you will. I'll use the term stage and chancel one way or another, both meaning the same place, where the worship leaders stand. So we've got all these little drawings and all these little letters. What does all this stuff mean? Well, first off, whoever designed this has come up with 6 areas: down right, down center, down left, and then up right, up center, up left. Very simple. They've divided their stage into 6 areas. So each area they've decided to light with 4 different lights. We've got one from the front, from one direction, one from the front, from another direction, and then we've got a warm light and a cool light from overhead. That takes care of the down right area. After that, it's rinse and repeat. We just keep doing that over and over. We make sure that that down center area has warm lights and cool lights from overhead. It has a right light from the front and a left light from the front to get that covered. And we go over and we do that 4 more times, and we've lit that stage. Now, one of the things that you notice when we talk about in previous slides, we had all these beautiful angles. It was exactly 45 degrees up and 45 degrees over. If you look at this guy, well, we're not getting that. The lights aren't able to get exactly 45, but we've done the best that we can, and we're going to do a good job even though we don't get it all those exact angles. I found this image, and I like it a lot because it shows what you're dealing with when you're dealing with house of worship. These are beautifully designed buildings, but they're not designed as theaters. They're not designed for absolutely perfect lighting placement. And in the case of this theater, people have done a really, really nice job of tucking the lights in. We've got lights over the congregation. We've got lights just in front of the chancel area. We've got lights over the chancel area, and we may not get a perfect 45 on every area on that stage, but we do have lights from different directions, from overhead, from the front, and you're going to be able to get a really good result out of this. And you're going to be able to get a good result for the people sitting in the room for video lighting, because part of what professional lighting designers do, part of what systems people do, is they know they don't just say this is what you have to have. We start out looking at your space. What are the limitations of your space? What are the constraints of the architecture? We don't want to wreck the architecture of this church by hanging pipes in front of all that beautiful architecture. We figure out how to make it work with your church, with your space. One other thing to remember is we're also talking about house lighting or sanctuary lighting. It's not just the lighting over the chancel area. We've got all these seats out there. We've got all these people sitting out there. There are times when you want them to be as brightly lit as the chancel, so the worship leaders can see the people there in attendance. And sometimes you want it really dark. You want it more like a theater. So we're talking about that. One thing to point out, just to quickly point out, is you think of ETC as being a stage lighting or theatrical type lighting company, but we also make architectural lights as well. And we make architectural lights in an LED version that gives you beautiful bright house lighting that looks good in your architecture. And it also, one of the key things about architectural lighting fixtures is that they dim extremely well. They don't flicker when you're bringing the house lights down and the house lights back up. We do a really good job of that. So a little bit of soft sell in the middle of our presentation here. What does a lighting system look like? Well, up until just a few years ago, this was kind of the way they all pretty much looked. If you look in the lower right-hand corner there, we've got power coming into the building. We've got all this electricity coming into the building. That's tied into a big dimmer rack, and that dimmer rack can control up to 96 different fixtures, 96 different channels, and we send wire out of the top of that dimmer rack, and each one of those fixtures across gets power from that dimmer. And how does the dimmer know what to do? Well, we've got a console that's sitting out in the sanctuary area, and we're running one little wire of data over to that dimmer. That's how lighting systems have been designed to make it very, very simple for the longest time. We've got a dimmer, we've got control, we've got power, we break the power up, we make all that stuff work. What's changed? Why is this no longer quite enough information? So now we're going to hang some LED lighting fixtures up with our standard light bulb fixtures. So we put these 3 lighting fixtures in there, so now we need to get power to them. Well, LED lighting fixtures don't work well with dimmed power. In a lot of cases, you don't want the power run through a dimmer, even if the dimmer's at full. That's not what they need. They need their own separate electrical system. So now I've got to start all over again, and I have to run constant power, power right out of the wall that hasn't gone through a dimmer to each one of these fixtures. And also, the next thing that's changed is not only do I have to get data to my dimmer rack so I can tell all my dimmed fixtures what to do, all my dimmers what to do, I have to get data also to each one of these LED fixtures. If you have moving lights, each one of those needs data. So the point of this little exercise is to say that system design is really complex, and we could talk for hours about all the ins and outs of designing a system for a small space, for a medium space. How do I get data everywhere? How do I get power everywhere, and the right kind of power to make all this work? But it's just to point out the fact that one of the things that you depend on a good dealer for, a good systems person for, is to do all of that for you. To talk about ETC, we make all the stuff that you look at and that you want to talk about. We make big, exciting, fancy lighting consoles for control. We make tungsten halogen fixtures. We make LED fixtures in spotlight version. We make LED fixtures in washlight versions. We make all that stuff. But the other thing that we do so well that no one sees is we do all the bits in the middle. We do the power distribution. We do the data distribution. We've created all of these products, and I want to emphasize this yet again. This is scalable. You don't have to buy too much gear. We make small distributed systems that work really well, not only in your sanctuary. What about your youth room? What about your fellowship hall? We build small and medium-sized systems for those situations, and we can equip even the largest big mega church auditorium as well. We can scale all this stuff to do exactly what you need. We want to talk a little bit about control. That's always fun to look at big, exciting lighting consoles. This is the EOS TI. This is the console that sits on Broadway shows. It's in numerous Broadway theaters right now. And you're looking at this and saying, I don't need that. I can't afford that. That scares me to death. But it's not just about that. This is the ColorSource AV. This little console, you can pick it up and carry it under your arms, but it will run lighting cues. It will run effects. It will control moving lights and LED lights as well as conventional lights. You can use this little guy in a quiet Wednesday evening service, or you can do exciting lighting on a praise band. This little guy will do all of that stuff. Now, if you're thinking, you know, all that console stuff is fun, but just day to day, I just want buttons to push. I want a switch on the wall that gives me what I need. We can do that too. You can configure wall stations to do exactly what you need for any situation you want. I've got a button to push for a 9 a.m. service. I've got a button to push for an 11 a.m. service, a button for Wednesday night. I want a standard weekday look when people walk in and out of the chancel day to day. Choir rehearsal wants to look this way. I can have a special wedding look. I can have an egress look. In other words, late at night, I want just enough lights on to be safe so that people don't run into things, nice and quiet. And I also want this to control both of my groups of lights, the lights over the chancel and the sanctuary lights. And this can do all of that, and you can label these buttons to say exactly what you want them to say. And to tie all this together, this is not an either or thing. This is, I can have a wall station on the wall that does all the stuff that I need most of the time. I can have this smaller control console sitting there all day, every day. The kids can use it for youth events. You can use it to light the praise band and do neat lighting for that. And then I can also have a place where if I am doing a large Christmas pageant, a large Easter pageant, and when someone needs to bring in a big full-size console, you can tie that right into the system. So a properly designed system does what you need it to do and takes care in a very simple way your day-to-day needs and allows you to bring in people that can do the really fun big-time lighting stuff when you want to do that. And one other little detail about all this, tied into these systems that we're talking about, you can put all this stuff in there that will also help you in terms of energy saving. I can do time clocks. In other words, we can do a clock function that we call a sweep. At 6 p.m., it turns off every light except for just a few that we need on. Someone comes in for an evening function, turns things on so that we can have a meeting at night or a choir rehearsal. We can do another sweep at midnight to make sure that lights aren't left on unnecessarily and burn energy. We can have occupancy sensors. If a room is sitting fully lit and no one is detected, and we can turn the lights down, not off, but down, any level you want, to make sure that we're not burning power that we don't need. A lot of sanctuaries have big, huge windows, and you've got lots of daylight coming in. You turn all the lights on. Well, if the sun's pouring in, you don't need all the lights, and we can have sensors built in so that the lights are turned down when daylight is providing much better lighting than we could ever do. So all of these functions can also be built into your system along with the ability to light your sanctuary and your chancel area. We're going to talk a little bit about video again. Now, the key to video, if you're in a studio, you're not worried about what people in the studio see. You're worried only about the image. In the context of like a worship service, you've got several hundred people sitting out there, and you want it to look good for them, but you also want the screens to look good. And if you're doing broadcast, it's especially important to have good video lighting. Video lighting, people have their own little set of challenges. In the case of these examples, I'm just going to show you some examples of what video folks do. I've got a subject. Our subject there is lit with warm light, with tungsten halogen warm white light. The white light coming in through the window is daylight. It's a very cool white light, and the camera is set for that daylight color temperature. So what happens there is that the plant looks white, the light coming in the window looks white, but the wall looks a little orange, and our subject looks especially orange. That's not a really good natural skin color. In this case, the subject is lit with warm white light. The camera is set for warm white light, but you still have all that daylight pouring through there. So while if you look at the subject's skin tones, they look quite nice, there's still all that blue around because the camera is not adjusting to both types of white light. In this case, I've got the subject is lit in daylight. The daylight is pouring through the side. The camera is set for daylight. So this all looks pretty good. This all looks pretty natural. But if this was not a computer image and I was actually standing in the room and looking at her, she would look pretty stark. She would look pretty cold because of all this daylight coming in from all these directions. There's not a lot of warmth there. So this is what video people do. In the case of this example, we've got the camera set between the two. The subject is lit with warm white light. We have daylight pouring in the window. The camera is set between the two, so we get a good balance. Her skin tones look natural. The walls don't look really that blue or that orange. We've managed to balance all that. So that's just a little bit, just really a tiny hint about what video people deal with, especially when they're working in a live situation. Now let's talk a little bit about LEDs. Earlier on, we looked at our little lighting system that we created, and we had 24 lights, and we're assuming that those 24 lights are in a nice neutral open white and look really good on human skin without color. If I've got a praise band, if I've got a youth choir, I want to do more than that. So if I want 24 more red ones, that's 24 more lights. If I want 24 more blue ones, I'm starting to stack up an awful lot of lights out there. So of course, the biggest change in lighting these days is LEDs. I have one light now that can make all these colors. So let's buy some of those and hang them up in the air and we'll be done here. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, not all LEDs are created equal. There are a lot of things you need to know to get the best, to do the best thing that you can do with those LEDs. A lot of lesser expensive LEDs, well, first let's look at this. This is tungsten halogen. This is a simple way to talk about the full spectrum. A light bulb is a beautiful source of light. That black line is your eye's sensitivity to light. The colored line is what a light bulb does. It looks really good. I've got a full spectrum of light. Someone standing in natural white light, tungsten halogen light, generally looks pretty good. A red, green, and blue LED fixture, RGB. These are the ones that were sold initially when we started building LED lights. They make a lot of red, a lot of blue, a lot of green, but they're not a full spectrum source. So you can make nice colors on a white wall, but these are not going to do a good job of lighting skin tones. These are not going to do a good job of making human beings look nice and natural. One of the big things that we pioneered is adding a fourth color, and that fourth color was a lime green. Now, it doesn't sound intuitive to think that a lime green color in an LED will make our skin tones look better, but it does work. Notice how it's not a perfect arc there that fills your eye's ability to see color, but it gets pretty close. So RGBL lights are a really good way to, in a relatively cost-efficient way, light your chancel area. Oh, by the way, we make those. Let's do a little soft selling here. We make ColorSource Spot and ColorSource Par. These use the RGBL, L for lime, red, green, blue, and lime color system. And these do a really good job of wash lighting and spotlighting. Now, ideally, if you're doing broadcast quality lighting, if you really want the best look of all, you jump up from 4 colors of LEDs to 7 colors, 7 different colors of emitters. And we can do, again, it doesn't look exactly as perfect as tungsten halogen light, an old-fashioned light bulb, but it gets really close and it's variable. And the 4-color RGBL or the 7-color RGB, 7 colors of lights, including the lime green, these are your ideal fixtures to put up in a house of worship. These guys will give you good natural color. These, in a traditional worship service, your human beings standing on stage will look like human beings. They won't look artificially lit. And also you have the capability within these lights then to do the fun stuff for the praise band, to do the fun stuff for the youth choir stuff. If you're doing a Christmas pageant or an Easter pageant, you can do really theatrical lighting for those and make them look fantastic. So to think about bringing LEDs into your facility, you have to be careful. You have to know what you're looking at. You have to know what the capabilities are and make sure that you're putting the right kind of fixtures in there that do exactly what you want them to do. And we build the 7-color fixtures as well. The ColorSource Source 4 LED Series 2 is the industry standard for a wash light, or for a spotlight. The Desire D40 is a standard for 7-color, really good soft edge wash type lighting. And to kind of drive the point home here, just with RGB, we're not going to get good natural skin tones. It goes a little too pink. 4-color looks really good. In the case of a 4-color fixture, I might want to augment that with a little tungsten halogen from the front. If I've got a high quality 7-color fixture, I have beautiful looking skin tones. And that same light will do reds and greens and blues for the praise band as well. So I've got all things that I need there. So again, picking the right light to do the job is very, very important. I'm just about to wrap up here. The things that you see in a, there are a lot of things that I can't show you in a PowerPoint, but they're things that are important. Sorry. First off, we are systems experts. We know what we're doing. We work closely with Full Compass. Full Compass has lighting experts that know how to put all this together. I like to emphasize the fact that our stuff is made in America. We're in Wisconsin. We employ people in our factory that live here, and that's kind of a neat thing. We provide 24-hour phone support. I don't think any other manufacturer does what we do. If you have a problem at midnight and call our support line, you will get a call back. We provide a trained, educated dealer network. We have our own trained, educated field service technicians that work with that dealer network that will work with you to get you what you need. And the first item in the bullet point there that I'm saving for last is dimming. I can't show you LED dimming the way we do it. If you've used LEDs, you know that sometimes they don't dim very well. I'll be going on a fade from full on to full off, and when it gets toward the end, the light gets choppy. They drop out instantaneously. They don't do a beautiful, smooth light source type dim, but we do that. I can't show you in a PowerPoint, but we do an amazing job, I think, of providing all the things that we've been talking about throughout this presentation. All of the things that we're talking about will dim well and look really good when you're bringing them up and down in front of an audience and in front of a camera. And the final little thing, we have an unprecedented fixture warranty on our LED fixtures. No one else does this. We've done enough testing that we're going to warranty these things for a long time. I am aware, we all know that it's not a trivial matter for you. You work hard to put the funds together to create a beautiful lighting system for your facility. You want it to last. You're spending the money. It needs to be good for good, solid products that a manufacturer will stand behind, and we do that better than anyone. So having said all that, I am pretty much done and ready to open it up for questions. I think Jim's going to jump in here and start moderating this. In the meantime, I've put together some kind of neat, interesting examples here. We've
Yes,
got a
Tom,
nice look.
that's great. We had a lot of good information there, and some great pictures to go and diagrams to go along with this. And it just amazes me the difference, the wide variance in these houses of worship that we have, down from the very traditional small churches up to huge theatrical looking places such as this you have up on the screen there as well. It can be very challenging lighting all those things, and I'm sure you would agree. A couple questions we had come in. One of them being all of the things that you have, Tom, that you had talked about are all fixtures that are set. They're not moving. What about moving lights? What are some advantages to adding that into a house of worship? I know with the real modern churches and so forth, that and worship bands, praise bands, that's pretty obvious. What about in traditional situations or situations that apply across the board? Where's an advantage fall?
Um, the great thing about moving lights, it's interesting to know that moving lights were not initially created to be a rock and roll toy, to fly beams of light through the air. They were truly created to be a remotely programmable theater light. Um, and the idea that I can, even in a more traditional service, I can have light, very tightly focused light, exactly where I need it. I have a soloist, I can put light exactly head and shoulders only and light them in a beautiful, wonderful way. And I can do that with moving lights. I don't need to have another light to light each individual tiny area when I want something more specialized than just general area lighting. So moving lights can do that for me in a more traditional thing. I also want to, I think everyone realizes that we're not just talking about Sunday morning church. Um, most sanctuary areas are used for youth choirs, are used for um, Easter pageants, are used for different meetings, different functions. And moving lights gives you ability to do interesting and fun things. But it's important that a good moving light does good color, it does good imaging, it can go hard edged or soft edge and blend well. It can be very noticeable in the case of a big a praise band situation, but it can also be very unnoticeable, but do things that you may not have enough other lights to do. Add texture to the wall, add patterns, um, do interesting things. Um, that if you tried to hang a conventional light to do every one of those, um, you would have 1,000. You'd have 1,000 lights in the air and no way to maintain all that stuff. Um, so yeah, and again, to do a little bit of soft selling, I couldn't even begin to get into in the context of the length of this webinar. I couldn't even begin to get into to moving lights, but we make those as well. And Full Compass knows our product line, and Full Compass can talk to you about what you need as far as getting a moving light that's right for the job.
Yeah, I can see where definitely there would be an advantage to having those in some situations, not all. Um, the So you talked about both tungsten and LED. One of the questions that we have is, would you suggest, Tom, that you have a combination of those two? Have you seen any situations where one it might be better to have just tungsten, or it might be better to have just LED, or it's just, I guess it varies whatever whatever the need is of that church.
Um, to be honest, the hybrid, what I call a hybrid system, chances are you already own tungsten halogen lights and they work quite well, and you're adding to them with LEDs. And in a properly configured situation, um, to put them together is a wonderful solution. Um, now I could blue sky and say, yeah, let's rip all that stuff out and send it to the dumpster and put all LED fixtures in there, but that's so unrealistic and so wasteful. It's just not necessary. You can add LEDs to to a system of tungsten halogen lights, and they can add a huge amount of value. And then over time, you can slowly but surely start phasing the tungsten halogen out and adding more and more LED fixtures to replace them. This gets back into the deep dark area of system design, and how do I create a system that will handle both right now and slowly but surely move to LED fixtures over time. It's also a time to point out that the average tungsten halogen light bulb maximum will run about 2,000 hours. So you're changing bulbs yearly. If you're a very busy facility, even more than that. A properly configured, properly built LED fixture, the lifetime is 50,000 hours. So the day-to-day aggravation, I've got a light bulb out in my sanctuary, and I have to bring scaffolding in to change it. The more LED fixtures you have, as you can phase them in, they're going to save you a little bit of headache as far as maintenance as well.
Okay, so we have another question in here from John. The question is, does ETC provide advice for rearranging an existing system? So he says, we have a set of ColorSource PARs, but no one with expertise in blending in the room look with video look. I think you touched upon some of that. So do you offer that advice? I know we have several people on staff that do that. And John, if you're a customer of ours, absolutely give us a call. But do you have some experts on staff there, Tom, for that as well?
We do. We have regional sales offices, and the regional sales office have what we call field project coordinators. Part of their job is to not to do selling, but to do all the work that needs to be done once you bought the gear, to help you configure it properly. So between a well-educated dealer like Full Compass and our field service people, our field project coordinator people, we can get you the advice you need. We can come in and give you a little bit of help to help you configure it better, or perhaps maybe help you with finding more local resources for that as well. But good dealers and our people can absolutely, yes, give you some information about how to use the gear, the equipment to its best advantage.
Okay. Another question here. I see actually the picture you have up there, you can see some lights up in the upper left there. Majority of all fixtures that we see are black. They have the black finish there. And I know for a fact, because you guys are a very, very good partner of ours, just down the street from us here in Wisconsin, that there are different colors available that might match better. For instance, in this view that you have here, a traditional church that might match and blend in a little bit and be a little less visible to the eye.
Yes,
so
we
you
do.
have some custom. Go ahead.
We absolutely do. We manufacture in white and black and silver, which does cover most people's needs. In some products, I can't say in all products, we can do custom colors as well. To be honest, it's hard to do those in quantities of 4 and 5, but if you're building a new building and you need a goodly number of those to be a custom color, we've done custom color as well. So again, I love this photograph because it's an old school traditional church, and
Very
they've lit
high
it
ceilings.
with very high ceilings, and they've lit it not in a garish way, not in a way that looks out of context for that wonderful old building, but they've added just enough lights in the right places to put a tiny little bit of color here and a tiny little bit of emphasis there for the architectural detail. So I just love that image. I think it's great.
Oh, it is great. You've got the arches lit up.
Yeah, it does it, and you can do it in a way that doesn't call attention to the lighting. It makes the building itself look the way it's supposed to look.
That's great. So, Tom, that's all we have for questions that have come through from our listeners. So I guess at this point, it's just a matter of wrapping up. I know that you guys have been a great partner with us. We have a lot of people that have actually gone through your facility and been trained and seen how these all of your fixtures are built. and have you've come over here several times and done training with us as well. And we have a lot of experts on staff. So you listeners out there, absolutely contact your salesperson in anything that you want to add on, like John, for instance, you starting to add on video to your church on how to light that. We definitely can help you out on that. So again, thank you, Tom, um, for this presentation today, and I look forward to many other training sessions from you for our staff, and hopefully some webinars in the future.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thanks for giving me a platform to do this. I enjoyed putting this together, and hopefully, I'm looking forward to the surveys. Attendees, please listen. Please fill the survey out. I want to know how I did. So if I do it again, I want to make it even better. So let me know.
Yes, and let us know what kind of subjects in the future that it would be beneficial to you folks out there for us to bring to you. Once again, thanks, Tom, and this concludes our webinar for today.
Thank you, Jim.